"No, Grandpa is blind, they'll devour him." The scream tore through little Anya's throat, but it was swallowed by the hellish howl of the blizzard. At 9 years old, she saw the first eyes glowing in the icy darkness, then dozens, hundreds. More than 700 hungry leopards, an icy wave of death amidst the 74-degree storm that froze the soul. What could a child do against such a savage horde? When the life of her blind grandfather, the last link to the ancestral stories of Yakutia, hung by a thread under the white shroud of impending death. Anya felt the ice tighten around her own heart, but a stubborn flame, fueled by love for her grandfather, refused to be extinguished. Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom of the yurt and the vast whiteness outside, now fixed on the luminous points multiplying in the blizzard's darkness. Each pair of eyes was a promise of danger, a predator driven by hunger and unbearable cold. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, a small pain that anchored her to reality. Inside the yurt, her grandfather, Semyon, remained motionless on his bed of furs. His eyes, opaque with blindness, were fixed on an invisible point, but his head was slightly tilted, as if he were listening not only to the wind's howl, but also to the heavy silence that formed between the gusts. He might not see the leopards, but he felt the change in the atmosphere, the tension in the air, the subtle scent of danger the wind carried. A wrinkle of worry creased his aged forehead, and he brought a trembling hand to his chest, where a mammoth bone amulet rested. Anya ran to her grandfather's side, kneeling and holding his cold hand. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice choked. "They're here. Many." Semyon squeezed her hand. "I know, my little star. I feel their cold, the hunger they carry, but you are strong, Anya, stronger than you think." His voice was calm, a balm for the panic threatening to engulf the girl. It was the voice that told stories of giant bears and forest spirits, of hunters who overcame the impossible with cunning and respect for nature. Those stories. Anya's mind began to race, not in panic, but in search of a solution. Her grandfather always said that the greatest power lay not in brute force, but in intelligence and the ability to see what others couldn't. She remembered a legend about a hunter who, cornered by a pack of wolves, used the echo of the mountains and the smoke of a bonfire to simulate an army. "Illusion is a powerful weapon, Anya," he had taught, "especially when the truth is too terrifying to be faced head-on." Low growls began to pierce the sound of the wind, closer now, mingling with the cracking of ice forming on the yurt walls. Anya knew time was precious. She stood up, her knees still weak, but determination hardening her gaze. She looked at the small brazier in the center of the yurt, where dying embers still fought against the cold. Smoke was the beginning. With nimble hands, despite the trembling, Anya began to feed the fire with small pieces of dry wood and moss, carefully saved for emergencies. She needed more smoke, dense and thick, that could spread through the yurt's top opening and be carried by the wind, creating an invisible barrier, a sign of something greater. As the fire crackled and smoke began to rise, she thought of screams. Screams. Not her own, but something that sounded more menacing. Her gaze swept the yurt, landing on an ancient shamanic drum made of stretched reindeer hide, which her grandfather kept with reverence. He used it for his stories, to evoke the spirits. It was heavy, but Anya dragged it near the entrance, feeling the rough texture of the hide under her fingers. She could use the drum to create a sound that would echo, that would mingle with the wind and the growls, confusing the predators. A shiver ran down her spine, but it wasn't just from fear. It was the feeling of being on the verge of something grand, of invoking a force that went beyond her small stature. She looked at her grandfather, who now had a faint smile on his lips. He felt it, He felt the spark of hope Anya was igniting in the heart of that merciless blizzard. The girl took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs, but her mind was clear. The plan, though terrifying, began to take shape. She was Anya, daughter of Yakutia, and she would not surrender. The girl took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs, but her mind was clear. The terrifying plan was taking shape. She was Anya, daughter of Yakutia, and she would not surrender. With determination sprouting from the frozen earth, Anya turned to the brazier. The embers, once timid, received new life. She added dry moss and twigs, watching the smoke thicken and rise in spirals. It wasn't just smoke, it was a message, a protective veil of ancestral wisdom. The growls outside became more audible, a guttural chorus vibrating on the yurt walls. Anya felt the icy breath of the predators, hungry impatience driving them. Her small fingers trembled as she adjusted the yurt's top opening, allowing the dark, heavy smoke to escape. The wind, her accomplice, would carry it, spreading the illusion of a greater danger. Semyon, her grandfather, coughed softly, the smell of smoke invading his senses. He couldn't see, but he felt the urgency in the air and his granddaughter's effort. "It's going well, my star," he murmured, his hoarse voice firm. "Let the smoke tell them a different story." Anya felt a warmth in her chest, a strength coming from her grandfather's approval and trust. It was for him, for his wisdom, that she was there, fighting against the impossible. She then turned to the shamanic drum. It was large, almost as tall as she was, and the reindeer hide was cold and taut. Anya hesitated, her hand hovering over the surface. Her grandfather always played it with reverence, evoking the spirits of the ancestors. Would she, a child, dare to use it to scare away beasts? Fear tried to set in, but the image of the hungry eyes outside, the silent threat to Semyon's life, propelled her. With a deep sigh, Anya picked up the wooden and hide drumstick, heavy in her small hands. She struck. The first sound was a dull thud, almost lost in the wind's howl. She struck again and again, harder, feeling the rhythm her grandfather used in his stories. Thump, thump, thump. The sound reverberated inside the yurt, a primal heartbeat that seemed to awaken something dormant. Outside, the growls diminished for an instant, replaced by a tense, almost imperceptible silence. The leopards, accustomed to the silence of the snow and the sound of the wind, were confused. What was that sound? It wasn't an animal, it wasn't the wind, it was something different, something that didn't fit their understanding of the territory. The smoke, now denser, floated and mingled with the snow, creating ghostly shapes that moved with the wind. Anya continued to play, her small arms aching, but adrenaline propelling her. She wasn't just beating a drum, she was invoking the courage of her ancestors, the cunning of hunters, the strength of Yakutia itself. She imagined the sound spreading, echoing in the mountains, invisible through the blizzard, multiplying, transforming her small sound into a menacing cacophony. Semyon, with his eyes closed, listened. A faint smile appeared on his lips. He felt the vibration of the drum, the rhythm of life his granddaughter was creating. He knew Anya was weaving a web of illusion, a dance with the spirits of wind and snow to protect what was most precious to them. Little Anya, just 9 years old, was becoming the guardian, the huntress, the heroine Yakutia needed. Her beats, mingled with the wind's howl, were the melody of hope, the voice of resilience echoing in the frozen vastness. Little Anya, just 9 years old, continued to play the shamanic drum, her small arms burning with effort, but adrenaline propelling her. Each beat was a challenge to the cold, an echo of life against impending death. The sound was not just a rhythm, it was a prayer, an invocation, an ancestral melody that mingled with the blizzard's howl and seemed to gain a life of its own. She imagined the sound spreading, echoing in the mountains invisible through the storm. multiplying, transforming her small effort into a menacing cacophony that promised something larger and more dangerous than a girl. Outside, the horde of over 700 snow leopards, once hungry and relentless, now showed signs of confusion. Their growls diminished, and some twitched their ears, turning their heads to try and locate the source of that strange sound. The smoke, dense and dark, which Anya carefully directed out of the yurt, danced with the wind, creating ghostly silhouettes that writhed and expanded in the icy darkness. For the predators, accustomed to the brutal clarity of the hunt, that combination of distorted sound and vision was disconcerting. They didn't see a girl. They saw indistinct shapes, heard echoes they didn't understand, smelled smoke they didn't associate with fragile prey. Semyon, his perception sharpened by blindness, felt every nuance. He heard Anya's effort, her panting breath, but also the unwavering determination in each drumbeat. The faint smile on his lips deepened. He felt the vibration of the reindeer hide under his granddaughter's hands, the rhythm of life she was creating. A dance with the spirits of wind and snow to protect what was most precious to them. Little Anya, just 9 years old, was becoming the guardian, the huntress, the heroine Yakutia needed. One of the closest leopards, a large male with scars from ancient battles, took a step back. His body tense. He sniffed the air, but the smell of smoke and the strange sound were stronger than the scent of prey. His instincts, forged in generations of survival in extreme cold, warned him of the unknown. Hunger was powerful, but the fear of what could not be seen or understood was even more paralyzing. Other leopards followed his example, retreating a few steps, their tails swaying in uncertainty. The cohesion of the horde, once an overwhelming force, began to fragment under the weight of the illusion. Anya felt the change. She couldn't see the eyes retreating into the darkness, but the chorus of growls diminished considerably. The sound of the wind seemed less menacing now, and the silence between the gusts was no longer one of tension, but of hesitation. A wave of hope, warm and vibrant, coursed through her exhausted body. She was no longer just beating a drum. She was weaving an invisible barrier, an armor of sound and smoke. Her fingers ached, but she continued, each beat an act of faith, each puff of smoke a promise of protection. Semyon reached out a hand and touched Anya's arm. "They are retreating, my star," he whispered, his voice laden with pride and relief. "I feel the change in the wind, the relief in the air pressure. You did it. My little huntress." Her grandfather's words were a balm for Anya's soul, a recognition worth more than any victory. Tears of exhaustion and gratitude streamed down her frozen cheeks, but she didn't stop. The danger was still there, but the tide was turning. Anya's courage, stronger than the blizzard, was saving her family, one drumbeat at a time. Anya felt the burning in her arm muscles, but the exhaustion was eclipsed by a new and powerful wave of determination. Her grandfather's words, "You did it, my little huntress," echoed in her mind like a mantra, infusing her with a strength that seemed to come from the depths of the frozen earth. She continued to beat the drum, the rhythm now more confident, less desperate, a silent hymn of victory against the persistent howl of the blizzard. Tears of relief, mixed with cold sweat, streamed down her temples, but her eyes remained fixed on the yurt's top opening, from where the smoke rose, dancing with the icy winds. The leopards, once a menacing mass of glowing eyes, now moved with less conviction. The large male, the apparent leader, retreated a few more steps, his head low, sniffing the snow-covered ground as if searching for an explanation for the inexplicable. The smoke, dense and laden with the smell of burning wood and moss, mingled with the thin air, confusing their keen senses. The sound of the drum, amplified by the storm's echo, seemed to come from all directions, an invisible and powerful presence that defied their predatory understanding. They were accustomed to hunting what they saw, what they smelled, what they felt. That illusion, woven by ancestral wisdom and a girl's courage, was an enemy against which their instincts had no answer. Semyon, his perception sharpened by blindness, felt the air change. The pressure that had once oppressed him, the strong smell of wild animal that permeated the wind, all of it diminished. He could almost visualize the scene outside, the confused predators, Anya's illusion solidifying into an insurmountable barrier. His heart, once tight with fear for his granddaughter, now filled with immense pride. Little Anya, his star, was honoring the stories, not just hearing them but living them, transforming herself into the heroine Yakutia had always needed in its darkest moments. One by one the leopards began to turn away. It was not a panic-stricken retreat, but a calculated decision, a recognition that that prey, shrouded in smoke and mystery, was not worth the risk. Their slender, spotted silhouettes began to disappear into the whiteness of the blizzard, dissolving like ghosts in the storm. The horde, which had once seemed infinite, now dwindled to increasingly distant points, until there was nothing left but the howl of the wind and the falling snow. Anya stopped playing the drum, her arms falling heavily to her sides. The silence that followed, breaking the frantic rhythm of her heart, was no longer the menacing silence of waiting, but the silence of victory. She gasped, her chest rising and falling rapidly, the icy air burning her lungs. The yurt seemed to have expanded, the air less dense, the threat dissipated. She knelt beside her grandfather, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling the faint warmth of his body. "They're gone, Grandpa," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "They're really gone." Semyon stroked her hair, his touch soft and comforting. "I know, my little star. I knew you could do it. The strength of Yakutia runs in your veins, Anya. The wisdom of our ancestors is more powerful than any cold, than any ferocity." Anya closed her eyes, absorbing her grandfather's words and warmth. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but a sense of peace and a deep sense of accomplishment invaded her. The blizzard still roared outside. Temperatures were still deadly, but the immediate threat had been overcome. She had faced the impossible, not with brute force, but with intelligence, courage, and unwavering love for her grandfather. The night would be long and cold, and Yakutia's challenges never ended. But Anya knew that as long as there was love and wisdom, there would be hope. She was living proof that true strength lay not in what could be seen, but in the flame that burned within her heart. Anya felt the faint warmth of her grandfather's body, a safe haven against the biting cold that permeated the yurt. Her arms ached, muscles protesting from the effort, but the physical pain was a welcome reminder that she was alive, safe. The smell of smoke and burnt moss still lingered, mingling with the familiar scent of furs. Her grandfather's heart beat calmly beneath her ear, a steady rhythm that contrasted with the storm outside. A reminder that the frozen world hadn't disappeared, only the immediate threat. Semyon continued to stroke her hair, his rough fingers conveying tenderness. "You are the flame that warms this yurt, Anya," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Our ancestors would be proud. You honored their wisdom, gave voice to the spirits of wind and snow." The words were a balm for Anya's exhausted soul, filling the void of fear. She raised her head, looking at her grandfather's wrinkled face, his opaque eyes full of an inner light. "I was so scared, Grandpa," she confessed, her voice almost a whisper, dry tears leaving icy trails. "There were so many, more than 700. The image of the glowing eyes in the darkness was still etched, a vivid memory of terror. Semyon nodded. "Fear is a harsh master, my star. But courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And you acted, with intelligence and bravery that few adults possess." Anya looked at the shamanic drum, now silent on the floor. It seemed just an object of hide and wood, But for her, it was an artifact of power, a testament to her own strength. She had transformed fear into action, silence into a war cry, smoke into a shield. The small yurt, once a fragile shelter, now seemed like a bastion of resilience in the heart of the blizzard. There was still the cold, of course. The air inside the yurt, though milder, still nipped. The fire in the brazier would need to be fed, and the night would be long. But the despair of hours before had been replaced by a deep quietude, a certainty that they would survive. It wasn't just physical survival, it was the survival of the spirit, of the connection between them, of the heritage Semyon had passed on and Anya now carried. She moved away from her grandfather a little, feeling the need to move. She picked up a piece of wood and carefully placed it on the embers, watching the flames lick the wood. The warmth spread, a simple comfort. The drum, which had once resonated with the urgency of battle, now waited patiently, its future stories yet unwritten. Anya knew that Yakutia would continue to present challenges. The blizzard would pass, and extreme cold and scarcity were constant companions. However, something had changed within her. She was no longer just the girl who listened to stories. She was the girl who created her own, with the courage and wisdom of her ancestors. That act of bravery on the icy night forged in her a new understanding of life, of the strength that resides in love and the human capacity to overcome the impossible. She looked at her grandfather, who smiled softly, as if reading her thoughts. Together, they would face whatever came, because the flame of hope, lit that night, would burn stronger than any blizzard. Anya stood up, her muscles aching, and walked to the corner where they kept the firewood and dry moss. The flickering light of the brazier barely reached the pile, but her fingers, accustomed to the darkness, fumbled for more fuel. What she found, however, made her heart sink again. The pile was dangerously small, almost depleted. The thin branches that remained were damp, frozen at their tips, and the moss, once so dry and flammable, now seemed a compact mass of ice and fibers. The effort to create the dense, frightening smoke had consumed almost the entire supply. She tried to break a branch, but the wood was so stiff with cold that it snapped with a faint crack, offering no heat. A new wave of despair, silent and insidious, began to form in Anya's chest. The danger of the leopards had passed, but the threat of the cold, without fuel for the fire, was even more relentless. Semyon, with his sharpened sensitivity, felt the change in the air, the tension in his granddaughter's body. "What is it, my star? Is the fire weak?" His voice, once full of pride, now carried a note of concern. Anya turned to him, her eyes welling up, the small, useless pile of firewood in her hands. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice choked. "We have no more firewood, almost nothing, and what's left is wet and frozen." Semyon's smile faded, replaced by a grave expression. He reached out his hand, and Anya held it, feeling the coldness of his fingers. The warmth of hope that had just been lit now flickered dangerously, threatening to go out. Anya squeezed her grandfather's hand, feeling his wrinkled, cold skin. The despair, which she thought she had tamed, returned with a different, more subtle and insidious force than the fury of the leopards. Those predators were a visible threat, an enemy with whom one could fight, even if with illusions. The cold, however, was an invisible and relentless adversary, which could not be fooled with smoke or drums. It infiltrated, stole warmth, numbed the senses until life completely drained away. Semyon, noticing the tremor in her small hand, squeezed it back firmly. His face, though marked by worry, maintained a serenity that always calmed Anya. "Do not fear, my star," he said, his voice low and firm like the murmur of a river under the ice. "Yakutia has taught us that every challenge is an opportunity to find new strength. What do we have?" Anya took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Almost nothing, Grandpa. A few thin, wet branches, and the moss is frozen. It won't burn for long, and it certainly won't generate enough heat to keep us safe through the night." She pointed to the small pile, almost invisible in the yurt's gloom. Semyon turned his head in the direction of the pile, as if he could see it with his blind eyes, his expression thoughtful. He remained silent for a moment, his lips moving slightly, as if consulting old memories, searching for something forgotten. Anya watched him, her heart tight. He was thinking, searching for a solution where she saw only the end. Would ancestral wisdom, so potent against the leopards, be able to combat the lack of fuel? "I remember," Semyon began, his voice a little more distant, laden with past times, "when I was a boy. A blizzard like this, perhaps worse. My father, your great-grandfather, was sick. We had little to burn. He sent me outside to the small stone shelter we used to store our most valuable furs. He said that there, under a pile of deer hides, I would find something. Something he called the forgotten warmth." Anya frowned, curious and apprehensive. "The forgotten warmth? What was it, Grandpa?" Semyon smiled, a gleam of remembrance in his opaque eyes. "It was peat, my star. Dry, compacted peat, which my father had collected in a particularly warm summer. It burns slowly, with a deep and constant heat, almost smokeless. It is a treasure in times of despair." A spark of hope ignited in Anya's chest, but it was soon followed by a wave of icy apprehension. "But the stone shelter? It's far, Grandpa, and the blizzard." She looked at the yurt's top opening, from where the wind howled with renewed ferocity, bringing with it the promise of more snow and cold. The idea of going out again, alone, in the terrifying 74-degree C darkness and cold, was almost unbearable. Semyon felt her hesitation, her small hand trembling in his. "Yes, it's far, and the blizzard is cruel, but the shelter is to the west, following the trail that leads to the frozen stream. You know the way, my little huntress, and the peat. The peat can save us." He reached out his hand again, and Anya held it, his touch an invitation to courage, a reminder that she was not alone in her struggle. Anya closed her eyes, visualizing the path in her mind. The stone shelter was about 100 paces from the yurt, a small mound almost imperceptible under the accumulated snow. The trail to the stream was a path she and her grandfather took in summer to fetch water, familiar on sunny days. But now, under the deep snow and the total darkness of the storm, everything would be different, each step a challenge. Fear was still there, a tight knot in her stomach, but the image of her grandfather, fragile and dependent, ignited a new flame of determination in her heart. She had scared away 700 leopards. Now she would face the blizzard itself to protect him. Pete was their only chance. "I'll go, Grandpa," Anya said, her voice stronger and more determined than she expected, laden with a new resolve. Semyon smiled, a smile that lit up his wrinkled face with an inner light. "I knew you would, my star. I always knew. Remember what I always say. Yakutia gives us the cold, but it also gives us the strength to overcome it. Wisdom is in knowing where to look, and courage in going to get what we need." Anya stood up, her small figure wrapped in furs, and began to prepare for the most dangerous journey of her life. The connection between them, mutual trust and unwavering love, was the true warmth that would keep them alive. Anya moved with renewed gravity, each gesture deliberate. Her small, numb fingers fumbled with the furs, seeking the thickest layers. She pulled on her reindeer trousers, fox tunic and bear coat, feeling the extra weight. She tied her seal boots and put on her thick gloves, each piece an armor against the white hell. Semyon, motionless, listened to the rustling of the furs, his granddaughter's panting breath. His heart tightened, but he maintained his serenity. "Take the lantern, my star," he instructed, his voice choked. "And the small axe. It might be useful." Anya picked up the oil lantern and the short-handled axe, feeling their weight and purpose. As she approached the yurt door, She hesitated. The blizzard's howl seemed voracious, a hungry beast. The air inside the yurt, once a refuge, now suffocated. She took a deep breath, the image of her grandfather igniting the flame of determination. She unlatched it, and the fur door creaked. A biting gust invaded, bringing flakes and the pungent smell of ice. The air burned her lungs and nipped at her skin. The outside world was a white and indistinct mass, sky and earth mixed in a chaotic swirl. Visibility was almost nil, distorted by the frantic dance of the flakes. She took the first step outside, sinking knee-deep in the snow. The effort was immense. Each movement a struggle against the snow's resistance and the wind's force. The yurt quickly disappeared, swallowed by the merciless whiteness. Semyon, inside, felt the icy air and the silence that followed. He clasped his wrinkled hands, praying to the spirits of Yakutia. Anya advanced inch by inch. The lantern barely pierced the curtain of snow. She tried to orient herself by the wind on her face, remembering the westward direction. The trail to the stream was an illusion, buried under meters of snow. The cold was a constant presence, an icy embrace that tried to paralyze her limbs. Her lips cracked, the air tearing her lungs. She stumbled several times, falling into the soft snow, but rose stubbornly. With each fall, the image of her grandfather's smile, of the yurt's faint warmth, propelled her. She wasn't just seeking peat, she was seeking hope. The stone shelter seemed infinitely distant, a mirage. Time stretched, each minute an eternity of struggle. Despair brushed against her mind, the temptation to give up, to curl up in the snow. But her grandfather's words echoed. Wisdom is in knowing where to look, and courage in going to get what we need. Anya gripped the axe, using it as an improvised walking stick, and took another step. With each step, she became the story she would one day tell, her small figure a speck of resilience against the fury of Yakutia. She felt the wind howl stronger, seeming to come from all directions, confusing her senses. The snow whipped her face with the force of 1,000 icy needles. The weight of the furs, once security, now dragged her down. Her body trembled uncontrollably from the cold and the effort. Suddenly, her feet found something hard under the snow. It wasn't ice, but an irregular and rocky surface. She stopped, her heart pounding. Could it be? She felt with her boot, then with her glove, sensing the shape. It was a large stone, smooth on one side, covered in ice. Anya's mind connected the dots. The stone shelter was built with local rocks, and there was a large stone marking the entrance, which they used as a seat. Hope burned with renewed strength. She was close, but the joy was overshadowed. The wind, once diffuse, now concentrated, howling through a narrow crevice, creating a sharp, ghostly sound. It was the sound of wind passing through an opening. The shelter was there, but the entrance seemed blocked by accumulated snow and ice blocks. Anya knew it wouldn't be easy. Yakutia never made anything easy. She raised the lantern, its faint light dancing in the white darkness, and began to feel the icy surface, searching for the hidden entrance. The peat promised warmth and life, but the last barrier, the entrance itself, seemed as insurmountable as the leopard horde. She would need all her strength and cunning to clear a path. Anya raised the axe, her already exhausted muscles protesting in every fiber. The blade, though small, felt heavy in her numb hands, an icy extension of her own will. With a cry muffled by the wind, which became a hoarse groan in her throat, she delivered the first blow against the wall of snow and ice that blocked the shelter's entrance. The sound was a dull thud, the ice cracking with stubborn resistance, but the barrier barely yielded. The cold was so intense, it seemed to solidify everything around, turning the snow into an impenetrable rock. She tried again and again, each blow demanding a strength she barely knew she possessed, a reserve of energy that came from a deep place within her being. Ice flakes flew, stinging her already numb face like 1,000 invisible needles. Her hands, even with thick gloves, began to ache. Her fingers tingling with the threat of frostbite. Her breath came out in dense white clouds, freezing on her eyelashes, in her hair. Despair threatened to return, whispering that it was useless, that the cold would win, that she should give up and curl up. But the image of her grandfather, fragile and huddled in the yurt, depending on her, ignited a new flame of determination. He had trusted her. His wisdom had saved her from the leopards. Now her courage would save them from the cold. She knelt in the snow, using her gloved hands to try and tear off pieces of ice, but they were firmly stuck, part of the mountain's own frozen structure. The axe was the only tool, the only hope. With renewed determination, she began to strike methodically, not with disordered brute force, but with the precision her grandfather had taught her for cutting wood, seeking the ice's weak points. Small pieces began to break off, revealing the dark, damp rock underneath. Slowly, a small opening began to form, a black hole in the relentless whiteness. Inside the yurt, Semyon felt the cold deepen, an icy presence that seemed to suck the remaining heat from the dying fire. He heard the incessant howl of the wind, and each gust seemed to take a piece of his heart, an echo of Anya's struggle outside. Her absence was a heavy void, a deafening silence amidst the storm. He clutched the shamanic drum in his wrinkled hands, seeking comfort in the familiar touch of stretched hide, in the promise of protection from ancestral spirits. His blind eyes, fixed on nothing, seemed to see his granddaughter's small figure fighting outside, alone, against the relentless fury of IACUT. A solitary tear ran down his wrinkled face, not of despair, but of deep concern and an immense love that transcended fear. He whispered ancient prayers, words lost in the wind's roar, asking for strength, asking the ancestors to guide Anya's steps, to protect her from the cold and the invisible danger that lurked in every shadow and every snowflake. He knew she was strong, stronger than anyone could imagine, but she was just a 9-year-old girl, and the world outside was cruel. Anya finally managed to open a crevice wide enough to squeeze through, scraping her furs against the icy rocks. The air inside the shelter was different, less biting, stagnant, with a strange silence that contrasted with the chaos outside. The lantern, trembling in her hand, revealed a small dark space, the stone walls covered by a thin layer of ice that gleamed faintly. The smell of damp earth and something else, a dense, earthy aroma, filled her nostrils, a smell of dormant life. She swept the light across the floor, and there it was, a dark, compacted pile, almost indistinguishable from the shadows, but with the unmistakable texture her grandfather had described: peat, the forgotten warmth. A sigh of relief escaped her cracked lips, so deep it seemed to come from her soul. She knelt beside the pile, feeling the peat with her gloved hands. It was cold to the touch, but solid, dry, promising a deep and constant heat that wet wood could not give. There was enough to last many nights, perhaps until the blizzard passed completely and spring arrived. With her heart light with hope, Anya began to fill the fur bag she had brought. The peat was heavier than it seemed, but the prospect of warming her grandfather and the yurt gave her renewed strength, a purpose that overcame exhaustion. She filled the bag to the brim, tying it firmly with leather straps. The axe was put away, and the lantern, now a beacon of hope, lit the way back, a small circle of light in the darkness. Getting out of the shelter was as difficult as getting in, but now she had a clear purpose, a mission accomplished. The weight of the bag made her sink even deeper into the snow, each step a battle against the ground's resistance and the wind's fury. The wind seemed to mock her effort, pushing her back, trying to snatch the precious cargo from her hands. But Anya did not bow. She clutched the bag against her chest, protecting it like an invaluable treasure. The cold was still relentless, But the flame of hope in her heart burned stronger, fueled by the peat she carried and her unwavering love for her grandfather. She forced herself to move forward, one foot after the other, a small figure fighting against the white vastness, carrying not just peat, but the promise of life and warmth for the only family she had left. The yurt, still invisible in the storm, was her destination, her safe harbor. And she knew that every gram of that forgotten warmth was worth every drop of sweat and every shiver of cold. She continued, driven by unwavering determination, with each step approaching reunion and victory over winter. The weight of the peat bag, which promised salvation, was a real burden on her small shoulders, sinking her even deeper into the soft snow. Every muscle ached, every joint protested. The wind now seemed to have found a new fury, whipping her with gusts that made her stagger, threatening to knock her down. The lantern trembled in her free hand, its faint light dancing like a frightened spirit in the white darkness. She tried to maintain her rhythm, one foot after the other, her eyes squinted to protect herself from the snowflakes that felt like ice needles. With each step, snow entered her boots. Ice accumulated on her eyelashes, and the icy air burned in her lungs, making each breath a struggle. Inside the yurt, Semyon felt the cold tighten, an invisible claw that stole warmth from body and soul. The fire in the brazier was almost extinguished, only a few dying embers flickering faintly, like the last breaths of a fading life. He reached out to feel the air, and the coldness was undeniable, biting. Time dragged on, each second an eternity of anguish. He heard only the incessant howl of the blizzard, and with each gust, his grandfather's heart contracted with a sharp pain. Where was his little star? Had she found the peat? Was she safe? The prayers he whispered, once full of hope, now came laden with a deep fear, a dread he tried to hide even from himself, clutching the shamanic drum against his chest, seeking in it the strength of the ancestors, the promise that Anya would return. Anya, outside, felt her body give way. Her legs felt like lead, her arms weighed tons. The cold numbed her senses, and for a moment the temptation to lie down in the snow and rest, just for an instant, was almost irresistible. But then, the image of her grandfather, blind and helpless, appeared in her mind with crystal clarity, brighter than the lantern's light. He needed her. The peat was life. She clutched the bag against her chest, feeling the rough texture of the material through her gloves, a tangible promise of warmth. "I can't give up," she whispered to herself, her voice hoarse and almost inaudible, a thread of determination that refused to break. Not now. Suddenly, through the dancing curtain of snow, a dark, familiar smudge began to outline itself. It was faint, almost an illusion, but it was there, slowly growing in the merciless whiteness. The rounded shape of the yurt. A cry of relief escaped her cracked lips, mingling with the wind's howl, a sound of pure liberation. She was close. A new wave of adrenaline coursed through her exhausted body, propelling her through the last few meters. Each step was a monumental effort, but now there was a visible objective, a safe harbor that awaited her. She staggered to the fur door, almost falling, her knees buckling. With trembling hands, she fumbled for the latch, struggling to open it, her numb fingers barely obeying. The wind tried to push her back like a furious guardian of the storm, but she asserted herself, using her shoulder to force the entrance. The door creaked and yielded, revealing the dark and icy interior of the yurt, which still seemed like paradise. Anya fell inside, the peat bag slipping from her arms and falling with a dull thud onto the fur floor. The air inside the yurt, though cold, felt like a warm embrace compared to the hell outside. She dragged herself a few inches, her body trembling uncontrollably, her teeth chattering at a frantic pace. Semyon, hearing the sound of the door and the thud of the bag, raised his head, his opaque eyes fixed in the direction of the sound. "Anya, my star, you're back?" His voice was a mixture of relief and disbelief, choked with emotion. He reached out his hands in the darkness, searching for his granddaughter. Anya, without strength to respond, just crawled to him, nestling in his arms, feeling the faint, familiar warmth of his body. She was icy, but alive, and she had brought the peat. Semyon hugged her tightly, feeling the cold of her furs, the tremor in her tiny body. He pressed her against him, tears streaming down his wrinkled face, not of sadness, but of deep gratitude and love. "You did it, my little huntress. You did it." With a last effort, Anya pointed to the bag on the floor. "Peat, Grandpa. The forgotten warmth." Her voice was a whisper, but it carried the strength of her journey, the resilience of her soul. Semyon released her gently, feeling the floor until he found the bag. His wrinkled fingers felt the compact, dry texture of the peat. A smile of deep gratitude and love spread across his face. Hope, which had flickered dangerously, now burned with a new strength, promising to ward off the cold. The forgotten warmth would be the warmth of life. The forgotten warmth would be the warmth of life. Semyon, with a slow and careful movement, felt the fur bag, sensing the peat. His wrinkled fingers, trained for decades to recognize the textures of the world, confirmed the promise of warmth. That dense, earthy material, harvested in distant summers, was now their last hope against winter's relentless grip. He raised his head, his opaque eyes fixed on the darkness where he knew Anya was. "My star," he said, his voice soft but laden with a silent urgency. "We need to light the fire. Peat burns differently from wood, slower with a deeper heat, but it needs a strong base." Anya, still nestled in her grandfather's arms, felt her body tremble, not only from the cold, but from the exhaustion that consumed her. Her muscles screamed, and her head spun slightly. But his words, even whispered, were a call to action she couldn't ignore. She forced herself to stand, her knees protesting, and crawled to the brazier in the center of the yurt. The embers, once almost extinguished, were now just cold ashes, a cruel reminder of the time that had passed. "Grandpa," she murmured, her voice hoarse, "there are no more embers, and the wood is too damp to catch fire." Despair threatened to return, an icy wave that made her shrink. She had brought the peat, but how would she light the forgotten warmth without a flame? Semyon felt the hesitation in his granddaughter's voice. He knew the task was difficult, especially for a 9-year-old girl, exhausted and with numb fingers, but he also knew the strength that resided within her. "Do not fear, my little huntress," he replied, his voice firm, conveying a calm that seemed impossible at that moment. "We still have the flint lighter, and there are small dry twigs kept under our fur bed for moments like this. Remember, wisdom is not just knowing where to look, but also how to use what you find." Anya, with a thread of renewed hope, fumbled under the fur bed, finding the thin, dry twigs carefully wrapped in a piece of leather. She brought them to the brazier, along with the flint lighter and the piece of dry cotton they always kept. Her fingers, still numb, struggled to hold the small pieces. With each attempt at a spark, the icy metal slipped, and frustration grew. The wind howled outside, as if mocking her efforts. Semyon, hearing the metallic sound and Anya's sighs, reached out his hand. "Let me guide your hands, my star. Together we can do this." He sat beside her, and Anya placed her small hands over her grandfather's wrinkled ones. With sensitivity sharpened by blindness, Semyon helped her position the flint and cotton. "Now, a quick and firm movement," he instructed. Anya took a deep breath, concentrating all her remaining strength. With a precise movement, guided by her grandfather's hands, she scraped the flint. A bright spark jumped, falling onto the dry cotton. For an instant, nothing. Then, a small red dot began to glow, growing, transforming into a trembling flame. A sigh of relief escaped both of them. With extreme care, Anya used the twigs to feed the flame, protecting it from the yurt's icy air. The fire, small at first, began to crackle, licking the dry twigs. She then, following her grandfather's silent instructions, added small pieces of peat. The peat didn't catch fire immediately like wood. Instead, it began to smoke, releasing an earthy smell and a slow, deep heat. Minutes dragged on, which felt like hours. The peat flame was stubborn but constant. Slowly, the heat began to spread, first a subtle warmth, then stronger, radiating from the brazier. Anya felt it on her face, on her hands, and the trembling in her body began to diminish. She looked at her grandfather, who also felt the warmth, a smile of relief spreading across his wrinkled face. "You did it, my star," Semyon whispered, his voice choked with emotion. He squeezed Anya's hand, a gesture of love and pride that was worth 1,000 words. The forgotten warmth. It saved us. The yurt, once an icy tomb, was now a refuge, filled with the aroma of peat and comforting warmth. Anya, finally, felt the weight of her journey dissipate, replaced by a deep peace. She had faced the blizzard and despair, and she had won. The peat flame, burning slowly, was proof of her courage, of the love that guided her, and of the wisdom passed down from generation to generation. The cold outside continued to howl, but inside the yurt, life had found new breath, a new beginning. The slow and persistent peat flame finally dominated the yurt's air. The promise of warmth, once a distant mirage, now materialized, warding off winter's grip. Anya, exhausted to the last thread of her strength, felt relaxation invade every muscle. The trembling in her body diminished, replaced by a welcoming torpor. Nestled in Semyon's arms, her face against his chest, she listened to the calm rhythm of his heart. The earthy aroma of peat filled the air, a scent of salvation. Semyon gently squeezed her, his wrinkled hands caressing his granddaughter's tangled hair. He felt the warmth return to her tiny body, and the tension that had gnawed at him for hours dissipated, giving way to relief. "My star," he whispered, his voice choked. "You brought life back to us. You are the bravest of huntresses, the wisest of granddaughters." Anya raised her head, her eyes heavy with sleep, but with a gleam of pride. I just wanted Grandpa not to be cold anymore." Semyon smiled, a smile that lit up his wrinkled face, even in the gloom. "And you succeeded. You saved us." He released her carefully, feeling the floor until he found a wooden bowl and a piece of dried meat kept for emergencies. "Now, a little warmth inside too." With dexterity, Semyon heated water in a pot over the smoldering peat. The smell of dried meat, when added to the water, mingled with that of the peat, creating a comforting aroma of home and security. Anya watched, still dazed by exhaustion, but feeling hope blossom in her chest. The simple act of preparing a meal, something so trivial in normal times, now seemed like a miracle, a celebration of life that had been rescued by a thread, a testament to her own resilience and the love that united them. He offered her the bowl, and Anya held it with both hands, feeling the warmth spread through her numb fingers. The broth was simple, but the taste was the most delicious she had ever tasted, a taste of victory and unwavering love. Each sip was a balm for her body and her soul. Semyon chewed the dried meat slowly, savoring each piece while the warmth of the peat enveloped them. They didn't need many words. The silence between them was filled with mutual understanding, deep gratitude, and an unbreakable bond that the storm could not break. The blizzard continued to howl outside, but its sound seemed distant, muffled by the firs and the flame of hope burning in the yurt. The threat of the leopards, though present in the frozen vastness, seemed less imminent, as Anya's wisdom had created an invisible barrier, an illusion of strength that had driven them away. The cold, the true enemy, had been temporarily vanquished. Anya, with her belly warm and body relaxed, sleep gently pulled her in. She leaned against her grandfather's shoulder, feeling safe, protected, and deeply loved. Semyon hugged her again, feeling his granddaughter's regular breathing. He knew the struggle wasn't over yet, that Yakutia would continue to test them with its relentless fury. But at that moment, as the warmth of the peat spread and Anya slept in his arms, he knew they had overcome the worst. The courage of a 9-year-old girl, the unwavering love of a family, and ancestral wisdom prevailed. That forgotten warmth was more than peat. It was the flame of human resilience, burning strong against the white hell, promising a new dawn for them and for the soul of Yakutia, which always reborn with spring. That forgotten warmth was more than peat. It was the flame of human resilience, burning strong against the white hell, promising a new dawn for them and for the soul of Yakutia, which always reborn with spring. Anya awoke to the warm, earthy smell of burning peat, an aroma she now associated with safety and love. The faint light of dawn filtered through the yurt's furs, tinting the interior a soft grey. The wind's howl outside was still a constant presence, but seemed more distant, less furious. The warmth of the peat enveloped her like a hug, and the trembling in her body had disappeared. She stretched in her grandfather's arms, feeling the comforting warmth of his body and the gentle rhythm of his breath. Semyon still slept deeply, his wrinkled face relaxed in a well-deserved sleep. His aged fingers, still holding her tenderly, were a silent reminder of the journey they had shared. Careful not to wake him, Anya extricated herself and crawled to the brazier. The peat still burned, red embers pulsing under a layer of ashes. She added a few more pieces, watching the fire respond with a renewed glow. The simple act of maintaining warmth, once a common task, was now a sacred ritual, a testament to life that refused to yield. She looked at the fur door, imagining the world outside. The blizzard was still there, but the sense of despair that had dominated her the night before had been replaced by a resolute calm. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and relentless cold, and had found the strength to overcome. Semyon awoke with a sigh, feeling the more intense warmth and the smell of fresh peat in the air. He reached out, fumbling until he found Anya's soft hair. "My star," he murmured, his voice hoarse with sleep, but with a tone of deep relief. "The sun is rising, even if we can't see it, and the warmth is with us." Anya snuggled beside him, and Semyon pulled her into a tight embrace. He felt the renewed strength in her tiny body, the absence of trembling. "You are the flame that illuminates the darkness, Anya. Your courage is brighter than any star." Anya smiled, feeling the warmth of her grandfather's words warm her heart. "I just remembered everything Grandpa taught me, about the wisdom of the ancients, about never giving up." Semyon nodded, his blind eyes fixed on her, as if he could see her with his soul. "Wisdom is not just to be remembered, my little one. It is to be lived, and you lived it. You saved us from the leopards with your intelligence, and now from the cold with your determination. The spirit of Yakutia, the spirit of our family, burns strong in you." The days that followed were of waiting and hope. The blizzard gradually lost its fury, transforming into a softer snowfall. The warmth of the peat kept the yurt a cozy refuge. Anya and Semyon shared stories, laughter, and the comforting silence of those who had overcome an ordeal together. The threat of the snow leopards, though still present in memories, seemed to have diminished. The illusion of a greater presence Anya had created, combined with the decrease in the predator's extreme hunger as the storm subsided, had kept them away. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, painting the landscape a dazzling, shimmering white, Anya and Semyon emerged from the yurt. The air was still biting, but there was a promise of life in the gleam of the ice. The vast frozen expanse seemed to have calmed, breathing again. Semyon, with his hand on her shoulder, felt the warmth of the sun on his face. "Spring will come, my star," he said, his voice full of renewed hope. "And with it, Life will return. But what you did, Anya, will never be forgotten. You proved that true strength lies not just in resisting the cold, but in unwavering love and courage that burns stronger than any blizzard. You are the guardian of our warmth, the hope of our people. Anya looked at the white horizon, at the mountains that had witnessed her journey. She was no longer just a 9-year-old girl. She was a guardian, a huntress, an heir to ancestral wisdom. The winter was still long, but she knew that as long as there was love, courage, and the flame of resilience in their hearts, they would always find their way to dawn. Yakutia, with all its fury, had taught her the deepest lesson of all: life always finds a way, fueled by the unbreakable flame of the human spirit. Anya observed the horizon, where the white vastness met a pale sky, promising longer days. Winter still stretched on, but the blizzard's fury had subsided, and with it, the feeling of extreme isolation. News of what had happened in the yurt, carried by the first hunters who dared to venture out after the storm, spread through the small community like the icy wind, but with a warmth of admiration. When the neighbors, concerned, came to check if Semyon and Anya were well, they found the girl, no longer fragile, but with an aura of quiet and serene strength. The older women of the village, their faces marked by time and cold, looked at Anya with a respect that went beyond her young age. They hugged her, their wrinkled hands squeezing hers, and their eyes, once full of worry, now shone with a mixture of relief and pride. "You are the little guardian of our people," one of them said, her voice choked. "The spirit of our ancestors lives in you." Anya, shy, lowered her eyes, but felt the warmth of those words penetrate her heart. She didn't see herself as a heroine, just as a granddaughter who had done what needed to be done to protect her grandfather. Semyon, sitting near the peat fire that now burned constantly, listened to the praises and stories spread. A soft smile played on his lips. He knew that Anya was not just his star, but the star of the entire community. His blindness didn't prevent him from seeing the change in his granddaughter, the way she moved with new confidence, the voice that, though still childlike, carried the resonance of newly acquired wisdom. He felt her touch in his hands, now firmer, more conscious. As the days passed, life in the yurt and the village began to resume its rhythm, though with a new perspective. Anya no longer hunted out of immediate survival necessity, but accompanied the more experienced hunters, learning the secrets of the snow, the animal tracks, the silent language of Yakutia. She became an attentive apprentice, her keen eyes catching details others might overlook. The men of the village, once accustomed to seeing her as the blind elder's granddaughter, now treated her with a respect that elevated her, recognizing in her the strength and intelligence that had saved everyone. The story of the girl who scared away 700 snow leopards with smoke and shouts, saving her grandfather and the village's hope, began to be told on cold nights, around bonfires, mingling with ancient legends. Anya, in turn, continued to care for Semyon, reading to him the stories he could no longer see, but which she now understood with a different depth. She became the voice of the past and the promise of the future, the bridge between ancestral wisdom and the resilience of her generation. Spring, when it finally arrived, brought not only the thaw and the return of life to the frozen valleys, but also a renewal of spirit. Snowflowers bloomed timidly, announcing hope. Anya and Semyon, hands joined, watched the world transform. The sun, now stronger, warmed their faces, a gentle caress after winter's fury. Semyon squeezed Anya's hand. "You are spring, my star," he said, his voice soft. "The promise that no matter how harsh winter is, life always finds a way to bloom. Your courage not only saved us, but lit a flame of hope in all of us. You are the guardian of our warmth, the guardian of our soul." Anya looked at her grandfather, at the smile on his wrinkled face, and felt a deep peace. Yakutia, with its relentless challenges, had forged in her an unbreakable strength. She knew that life would always be a journey of overcoming, but now, with the love of her family and the support of her community, she was ready for any storm. The flame of human resilience, lit in her small heart, burned stronger than ever, a beacon of hope in the vast and beautiful frozen land.